symptoms of trauma. Week one, I'll briefly go over, we went over what is trauma, and we learned that trauma isn't just a huge catastrophic event, that it could be really any distressing experience or event that has an impact on on a person that makes it difficult for them to cope or function. We went on to talk about 3 different types of trauma: acute trauma, which could be just a single incident. We talked about chronic trauma, could be an incident that's kind of prolonged, so it happens over and over, maybe such as domestic violence. We talked about complex trauma, which is varied or multiple different traumas, and that leads to complex trauma. Then week 2, we discussed common reactions to trauma. I'll briefly go over that. We went over re-experiencing the trauma, maybe through nightmares or flashbacks. We went on to avoidance, which is like using substances to not, think about that trauma, try to get our brains away from that trauma. So maybe drugs or alcohol. We talked about hyperarousal, where you're always feeling on edge, like what's going to happen next, kind of just always nervous and worried. And then we talked about negative thoughts and feelings, and that's just sometimes after we experience a trauma, we kind of have a different lens on the world. We look at the world a little bit differently, much more negatively, thinking that, something bad's going to happen to us. We don't think people have best intentions anymore, and it just kind of leads us to that negative cycle there. So today, week 3, like I said, we're going to talk about key signs and symptoms. I have some notes to the right of me, so you'll see me glancing over because I don't want to miss anything. Feel free to leave comments or questions below, and I'll get back with you. And so let's start. So again, we're going to signs and symptoms. So we know that with trauma, we talked about last week with nightmares. So sometimes with trauma, you'll find it very difficult to sleep. Insomnia, restlessness. Even if you do sleep, it's not good sleep. It's not restless. You still wake up very tired. People could experience headaches, dizziness, fogginess in the brain. Sometimes you have strange sensations in your body, like maybe tingly or numb feeling sometimes. It can also create pain, just generalized pain as well. People may feel confused, have difficulty concentrating, experiencing anxiety and fear. Also guilt and shame, and sometimes self-blame. You'll find yourself withdrawing from others, kind of just retreating at home or alone where you feel safer. You might experience mood swings, irritability, anger, feeling sad or hopeless, sometimes feeling like in shock or disbelief, or even denial. Sometimes the event will come back to you out of nowhere, and if you ever had a panic attack, sometimes that's what that's about. Is you may not even be thinking of whatever your past trauma is, but somehow something brought it up in your mind, and it creates that sometimes that panic attack. You're easily overwhelmed, and I know personally this used to happen to me all the time. Every little thing made me extremely overwhelmed. Like I already felt like I had so much stress and pressure of everything that was going on, and then to add one more thing was just, even if it was something really, really simple, like going to the store after work to get something for dinner, I just didn't do it. I couldn't do it. I felt that was too much. And it sounds silly now, but back then it was a big deal. Everything just seems 10 times greater and bigger and harder than it really is. You don't like spontaneity because you want everything planned out because you want to know what to expect. You don't really care for surprises or not knowing where you're going, who's going to be there, what your surroundings are going to be like. You really like to feel safe when you go out places. So spontaneity is not something that you enjoy if you once did. Let's see. Again, you're on that constant state of alert. So scanning your environment, depending what happened to you. You'd be looking for your exits, people, kind of making sure people are calm and nobody's getting, escalated by anything or aggressive. You also have difficulty expressing your own emotions, and it's often hard to regulate your emotions as well because you're kind of like all over the place. And so it's difficult to kind of maintain. You may fake it for a little while, but in the end, it eventually will will make its way out. Again, you may have flashbacks. That could include if you smell something, hear something, go somewhere that's closely related or maybe back to the event where the incident happened. So any of those things with flashbacks can create, obviously, is due to trauma. Having intrusive thoughts or repetitive thoughts. So your mind is just constantly going. The wheels are just constantly spinning, and it is very exhausting. And if you've been through that or had that happen, you know what I'm talking about. It's extremely exhausting. It's like your brain never stops. You never get to rest. You're never sleeping. It's just constantly on the go, and it really makes you very, very tired. And then there's so many other issues, right, that come when you're not sleeping well. So let's see. Nightmares. Sorry about that. Nightmares, insomnia. I just have to hold it. Let's see. Nightmares, insomnia, and again, negative thoughts of the world and that viewpoint. And then just to pose a question, do you think that you can experience trauma and not even know it? And the answer is yes. Because, even though consciously we might not remember what happened to us, our brains and our central nervous system do remember, and it does keep track. And so, that's why sometimes out of nowhere, when some of these reactions might come to you and you're just like, oh my gosh, I was just sitting here watching my favorite TV show, and all of a sudden I feel this anxiety like raging within me, or, all of a sudden I feel like I can't breathe, or however it comes to you. And it's because our brains do remember. And one of my favorite books is actually called Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. And it's wonderful. I really, really love that book. I think I've read it 3 or 4 times. It's really good. I enjoy it. But it talks a lot about that, how your body, your brain remember the trauma. And consciously we may not remember it, but subconsciously our brains obviously do. And it creates a lot of these things for us. So next week we're going to talk about how trauma affects the person, how trauma affects our bodies, and kind of what that looks like when we live with trauma and not release it, not get it out. So sorry about the phone falling a little bit ago, but that wasn't too much of a distraction. Welcome any questions, and I look forward to seeing you again next week at 11:30, where we'll talk about how trauma